not SJP following you. And I was like, SJP? Who's that? And I'm like, no way.
Welcome to Two Online by Boys Club.
Hot internet news served fresh. I'm Natasha Hoskins.
I'm Deana Burke.
And this is Boys Club. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Two Online. This is a podcast by Boys Club where we talk about the internet and
things that are happening on the internet, trends, weird stuff that's popping off, weird little subcultures and corners. Today's a little bit of an outlier of an episode.
Yes.
We have an interview with Faze coming up. And the reason that we pulled it into Two Online is because he is desperately online as a person.
Oh my gosh. He needs to log off so bad.
The man needs to close the laptop. Put the phone in the drawer.
The phone needs to be in the kitchen. Like, it needs to be turned off somewhere. You joked in the interview, and this is really true. It was not an interview. It was an intervention.
It was. But the reason we had him on, in addition to being just too plugged in, he is the creator brains behind many of your favorite TikTok shows, some of the more episodic things that you'd see on TikTok. Faze has maybe had a hand in. So we felt like it was appropriate to bring him on and have a conversation about it. And some really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Smart guy.
Some really
smart
interesting
guy.
stuff.
Thinking a lot about next gen content, really, and where people are spending their time, where their eyeballs are, what's interesting, how do you tell stories on these different platforms, you know?
I feel like I've never felt so potently that the NBC Universals, the Fox, the Paramount, all of they're dinosaurs compared to the world that Adam and Gymnasium are living in, which is like, I mean, the time scales and the timelines that he was talking in terms of like content development and how they're thinking about developing shows is in days and weeks.
Yeah, totally.
It's not and the film studios, obviously think in terms of years. So it was really incredible how fast they're moving and all the different sort of little details that they're thinking about. And
yeah, that was the thing that stood out to me the most as well. The distinction between, okay, is the network television, is that a dying era and short form is the future? And the thing that stood out to me that he talked about was essentially like just the iteration, how quickly you can like turn something around, see if it's working, see if people like it, test it, iterate. And that makes a ton of sense to me and really feels like the new wave of how people are going to create content and entertainment online. So it's a great listen. Give it a go. And thanks for tuning in.
So today's guest on the pod is Faze, the head coach at Gymnasium, which is a production studio for short form content. He's the brains behind Boy Room, which we're going to talk about today. And Big Get was recently followed by Sarah Jessica Parker. Huge news. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Huge news. I nearly spat out whatever I was drinking.
I texted you and I was like, I've never felt a jealousy so deep. Like that's insane.
Also, my favorite part is that I was 6 days late to finding out. And the only reason I found out is I was like clearing the Boy Room DMs and someone was like, not SJP following you. And I was like, SJP? Who's that? And I'm like, no fucking way.
Royalty.
Yeah, that's like being divined by God.
I think, by the way, speaking of being too online, I think she's pretty online, though, because I went through her following, and she follows, like, a bunch of niche New York accounts, and I'm like, she's on the Reels feed, like, actively scrolling.
Well, she needs to throw a follow over Boys Club's way.
Shout out.
So, welcome to Two Online. We're excited to have you. You're a very online person. I want to hear from you. You do a lot of scouting of talent of people on TikTok.
100%.
And so, want to hear about your process for finding people, your like online diet. What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is I really do use TikTok like television. And so I think when I otherwise would have been watching TV late at night, I'm now just like on my phone. Because also it's like I see people doing the opposite, but I just can't consume TikTok during the day. There's like way too much going on. And like I like my TikTok time. Like my friend calls it TTT. I love TTT. So for me, like the prime TTT hours are between the hours of like 1 and 4 a.m. I think I go on at 1 a.m. with the intention of being off by like 1:45 because I have to be up early.
Sir, you need to find some help.
I know.
There's no sleep hygiene here.
Look, today's a Monday, start of the week. Start strong. I was on my phone till 5 a.m. Don't ask me why. I research so many things that I don't really need to know, but I just get down these rabbit holes and I have to see them through.
Wow. Do you have an Aura ring?
I don't. And
This
if
man does not have an Aura ring. I can guarantee you that.
you would say that I'm a dead man is actually what it would say.
No sign of life.
I will say what ends up happening is I'm on TikTok for a long period. I get so addicted to being the one that scouts this talent. And so when I'm on for 2-3 hours at a time, I am DMing, I would say 10 to 15 creators that I'm finding on the platform where they have anything from 150 Instagram followers to 500,000. And it really doesn't matter. It just depends on if I think there's something there. And I would say I meet with all of them, and maybe one out of that 15 then goes to the next step of let's actually talk about a project. But most of it is just catch up and see what they're interested in. And so if you imagine, I've done this almost every single week for almost 2 years now. So
Wow.
I've talked to a lot of creators and a lot of people who are accidentally creators. And it's now to the point where I follow 4,000 people on Instagram, and I'm hard pressed to think of who I can unfollow.
So tell us what you're looking for. What's the je ne sais quoi that you're seeking out between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m.?
Honestly, I would say this. If they're an on-camera presence, it's a little bit of that old Hollywood, like, do they have star power? And I think, again, it really does not matter how many followers they have to me. It's just a matter of, do they have that it factor? And it's really hard to put that into words, but some people have it and some people don't. I think if they're behind the camera, if they're, like, actually filmmakers or doing, like, really crazy edits, that is more just, like, pure talent-based. And I think the coolest thing about this new crop of kids that grew up using these platforms from the age of 12, 11, 10 years old is they're really just like one-man bands, and they know how to do it all completely by themselves. And the idea of having crew is like so foreign to them because they've only ever had to do it by themselves. And so I remember thinking this even 5-7 years ago, with our generation being more the YouTube generation. It's like when you look at how Hollywood is built, there are thousands of jobs in a million different categories of the industry. And I think a studio that starts today can be way leaner because everyone that works there is so used to wearing every hat at all times.
Totally.
So what you're bringing into the conversation is the crew. So you're saying, hey, you're a co-creator, you're doing something really interesting and different and unique. And me as Adam or as Gymnasium, we're going to come in and take what you're doing and make it bigger, make it better, bring in a production crew. Is that kind of the shape of most of those deals?
Totally. And again, it really depends on the type of talent that they are. Like with a Rachel Coster, I don't know, we'll get into her. Like, she is a comedian. She has been working the New York comedy circuit for a few years now. I was lucky enough to see one of her sets, and I thought she was like one of the funnier people I had, seen recently. And she came to us with a few ideas. Boy Room was one of them. And to us, that was like a bread and butter idea for us. We're like, this is just something we think is really going to hit. Let's shoot a pilot. Let's see if it works. And because we have our full-time team created, we can go shoot that pilot a few days later and then see what we actually think of it. But for us, there is also the conversation of, like, let's say you're a chef and you've been making food content for the last 2 years and you have quite a big following. I think for us, it's like, we look at you as if, how do we turn you into the next Food Network? How do we like provide more funding and scale this into like a bigger, wider digital network of professionally filmed shows that live both like short form and long form to take this into a real business?
So you're scrolling at 5 a.m. What's something that you've seen recently that you're super excited about that stops the scroll for you?
I'll give you a good example. There's this creator that goes by Luka Big Pants, and he is based out of Canada. I believe he's in Montreal, and he makes these videos that are essentially, they play like early video games where it's like the choose your own adventure, pick what the answer is to this question, and it'll unfold a new chapter of the story. And it's super pixelated, and I don't really know how he makes these videos, but it's fascinating. And every video he makes between TikTok, Instagram, YouTube probably gets close to 1 million views. And you meet with someone like this because you're like, what do you do? Like, what do you actually, like, what's next? Because clearly you're so talented at this. And the answer is usually like, oh, well, this is sort of what I do for fun, and this is like my passion, but I do graphics for music videos and commercials and whatnot. And so I think when I meet with someone like that, the question is, how could we take what you're doing and turn this into an actual show where we can attract money, whether it's from brands or studios, but how do we like allow you to be paid to do clearly what you love for a living?
So is he doing like, it's like a split screen, like half of it's a game, half of it's his face, or what's the like?
I'm going to just send it to you right now so you
Okay.
can see it while we're talking about it. I think he's fascinating. He's got almost 700,000 followers on TikTok. and he's been making videos like this, I would say, since 2020. And so he's
Okay.
someone also that like I found early, DM'd, took a few DMs to actually get a response, and then took some more DMs to actually get on the phone with him. But like, I don't think people, when they think of TikTok, realize the kind of talent on the filmmaking side of things that's being posted there.
This is wild. This is a totally we've got a creative genius on our hands with this guy.
Creative genius.
This is very fresh.
Cool.
And is this like cinematic-ish? Like, is that the type of thing that you like and that you're gravitating towards? Boy Room, I would say, is more sort of reality show-ish based. Like, what lanes or like categories of creativity are you drawn towards?
I would say almost every project we have in our pipeline right now is unscripted. And the reason for that is it's sort of the easiest thing that we know how to monetize right now. And like, we kind of actually think of it as like our Tesla Roadster. It's like, we're doing this first because we know it's the thing that'll work the fastest and the thing that will monetize the fastest. And if we can sort of start getting that trust both from audiences and brands, we can then start venturing towards tougher categories to tackle, which is scripted, which is animated, and things like this that are, like you said, just truly cinematic, which I don't entirely know how to convince brands to get behind right now.
Let's talk about the monetizations. What does that look like, and what types of brands? I mean, you don't need to say exactly, but curious like how those come together.
So we really look at this as like old days free network television. The monetization truly does come from brand partnerships, sponsorships, product placement. We also think there might be a future in terms of like downstream products that can come out of shows we create. So if we were to work with a chef, we really do believe we'd be building sort of the Martha Stewart business. I think the funny thing is, in the product side of things, we don't really think there's anything new that we're doing. We look for inspiration in the great brands that were built off of television over the last 50, 75 years. It's just that instead of that starting place being on an NBC or a Food Network, we think it's TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. And is
that the holy trinity of platforms that you're working with?
It's the holy trinity right now.
Okay.
It's the holy trinity right now. I think that could change. I would say one of our biggest frustrations is with YouTube Shorts being 60 seconds or under. It's really hard to have a real episodic story in under 60 seconds. I think we even struggle at just around 90 seconds. And vertical content on YouTube above 60 seconds just really does not work. Honestly, I wish YouTube could somehow buy the patent from Quibi to have the same video be able to be played vertically or horizontally, because there are a few shows where we're going to start experimenting with filming both ways, but I would hate to have to upload 2 different videos for just the way that you would want to watch it. And so otherwise, I would say on the monetization side of things, you look at a show like Boy Room, we are showing off right now that we would like to upgrade these guys' rooms. I would love for us to actually be able to upgrade these guys' rooms and do a little bit of a Move That Bus America's Home Makeover edition, where we get these guys the help that they really need.
They need help.
I think it's deeper. I think there's some deeper issues there than potentially.
Well, look,
just
that's why our
a new
partnership
dresser.
with BetterHelp that I'm proud to announce today. We'll give them free therapy.
Speaking of Boy Room, 10 million views in about a month, 150,000 followers. Yeah, 4 or 5 weeks. Explain the concept for folks who haven't seen it yet.
So Boy Room is a show where comedian Rachel Coster investigates men's bedrooms in New York City and then gives them advice on how to fix them. We love the name Boy Room because first of all, we've just lived through girl dinner and girl math, and so Boy Room felt like it had a home right there. But I think the joke is most of these men are in their 30s and still living like children, so it's a fun way to tease them. We are blown away by the success, and so happy that everyone's been loving it as much as we've been loving it. Again, like Rachel pitched us a few ideas. This was one of them. We ended up shooting the first pilot for it 2 days later with a friend of mine who will never let me release that episode, even though it's my favorite one. He was very upset because we actually showed up at his house with cameras without telling him. But when we watched that original edit, everyone here at Gymnasium was just like, this is it. Like, this is everything we want to make. This checks all the boxes of what we think is a hit show. And so going into releasing a show, like, all we can do is have an intellectual guess on what we think will work best. When we put the first episode out eventually, the first 2 did fairly well on Instagram for completely organic traction. They each got around like 200K views initially. And then strangely enough on TikTok, we couldn't break 1,000 views combined. We had our worries that maybe the account thought we were a bot and it was shadow banning us or whatever, but we could see that those 1,000 views were coming from the For You page. It's just that we were losing about 95% of our audience in the first 3 seconds. And so when we went back and watched the first 3 seconds of the video, it was an intro where Rachel goes, "Welcome to Boy Room, the show where we investigate boys' rooms." And I think it just was a little loud and brash for people that are like scrolling in between a million different videos. And so we like carried on and released the 3rd episode on the same account just without an intro and just got into the episode faster. And that was enough where like an hour after we posted the 3rd episode on TikTok, it had like 500 likes. And we kind of all looked at each other and were like, oh. And then it was like an hour after that, it had like 1,000 likes. And I bought a bottle of champagne. And someone here was like, "Why are you buying? Don't like, you're gonna, ruin it. Don't jinx us." But it was like, we knew at that point, we've seen this happen so many times that we knew if we had 1,000 likes in 2 hours that this train was like moving. And within 24 hours after that point, we had over 30,000 followers in the account. And I think a combined 1 million views between the first 3 episodes. And so we were just so happy because our feeling was like, if one of these episodes hits, people are going to go back and binge the others. We think they're going to like this format. So it's just a matter of like tricking them to watch it the first time. And we were so happy that that was right. Like all the comments are people who just like immediately saw this as a format, kind of like took it into their daily lives. And our favorite thing now is when we put a new episode out, like all the first comments are like, "Wake up, there's a new Boy Room episode." And like, that's exactly what we're doing this for.
Okay, so part of, I think, the charm, but also like what keeps you watching Boys Room is that it's like anthropological. You're like going in, you're like on a quest.
It's planet Earth.
Yes, exactly. And I would say part of the emotion is like disgust.
Yeah,
totally.
Like there's like a feeling that it's
horror.
Like a really clear feeling of disgust, but you can't look away.
It's a car crash you cannot look away from.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess no question there, only a comment to say congratulations. It's really compelling and it's disgusting and so entertaining.
I know. I never really thought that the pitch would be Hoarders meets Queer Eye, but somehow that's what we landed on.
My favorite one that I've seen is Jerome. And I think part of that is because...
Fan favorite. That is the fan favorite. That's our biggest episode.
32 years old. That's a crazy...
No, we actually got his age wrong. And
okay.
Our dear friend Jerome just turned 34 last week.
Oh my
worse.
God.
Worse.
He's got
Sweet
to...
man.
Yeah, check some things out. Regroup.
I will say credit to GoPuff because, his hat had a cat. No, his cat had a hat that said GoPuff on it. And after the episode came out, GoPuff like sent him a gift card and I think like a new merch for the cat. So credit to their social team.
Credit to them, yeah.
Nice.
For real.
You are the short form king. There are 3 things that I think of with short form: vertical, lo-fi, and unscripted. That's for the most part. And I'm curious if those are the boxes that you think of when you think of short form, or is it just designing for platform first? So you're thinking YouTube, TikTok, Reels. How does your brain work around that?
Honestly, for us, and I hate to sound cheesy, it really is story first. What is the format we're actually trying to tell? What's the question we're trying to answer? Do we think people actually care about the answer of this question? And at the end of the day, is it entertaining? And so I think before anything else, whenever we get pitched an idea, we really think about it in a very traditional Hollywood sense of just like as a TV show. Does this have legs? Does it stand on its own? Is there a version of this that could even be longer if people loved the show? And do we think this is something that could last for years? And I think a lot of times we get pitched ideas that are man on the street, or I want to just go around and ask people this question. And we're like, that's great. And we totally support you making that. For us, we don't think it checks the box of it being an actual show. I have written on my desk that's like anytime I'm like taking Zooms, it's written right next to my laptop. It literally says, "But is it a show?" Because that's just the one question every time we get pitched things.
And by show, you mean episodic?
Episodic
Okay.
With a real story and a real hook. And we want everything we make to have those beats. And again, for us to imagine that if this was 20 years ago, we would have been making this as a traditional TV show. But because of the time that we live in today, we just don't think that's where our audience is watching.
So I want to talk about that. And I know you're watching Sex and the City for the first time. Congratulations. That's absolutely huge for you.
Really an incredible show. I got to be honest with you.
It's so good. And I'm curious if you think that a Sex and the City should be made in the year of our Lord 2024. Is that format a dying art and we're all just moving towards short form content? Or is there a place for all of these different types of shows? And in the same vein, is making all the content for short form just encouraging basically brain rot, where we're like minute and a half cycles all day long and no like time to develop a character and think about a story?
I think just to continue on to that question, your note earlier about the first 3 seconds being that sort of pivotal change in your editing, which unlocked the success for Boy Room, that's pretty alarming. That like, it's not like, not to be like pearl clutchy about it and not to be like add a layer of morals, but like that signals a real attention span brain rot city situation here, and very curious your take on it.
Well, I will say on the optimistic side, I don't think the art form of long form television and films is dead. I think movie theaters are here to stay. I think the Cinemaplex with 27 screens is not. I think the big screen with 1,000 seats is. I think we will all still go to the theater. It's just a lot less than we did when we were younger, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to a time where we're going to the theater every single week. Same with television. I think there will be 1 or 2 shows per year that everyone is watching and talking about, and I think a lot of the rest is background television as we're on our phones. And I feel like I'm not afraid to admit I'm on my phone a lot of the time that I'm watching TV. And I think a lot of us are too. So for me as a producer, it's like I want to be making things where I actually think people are going to be watching them and where there's going to be an audience. And so when I think that like my opportunity then would be to make the 1 movie per year that everyone's going to go see, or the 1 show out of the 1,000 that are going to get made, I don't like those odds. And I'm not a betting person, and I wouldn't take that risk. And when I think that we can iterate and create new shows on a whim and really quickly see if people actually engage with them, that's just a space that I'd rather spend more time. On the Sex and the City question, I really do think scripted actually has a space on these platforms. In the same way that I was saying we think of these platforms as network television on a monetization side, we think of it also in terms of the way the content works. In the same way that on network television pre-DVR, pre-TiVo, there was no guarantee that everyone was going to see every episode of something. It's the same way with short form. There's no guarantee you're going to see every episode of Boy Room on your feed as it comes out. You're going to likely miss episodes. The only thing that we have to consistently think about when we create new shows is what's a show that we can create where you could find it for the first time in episode 50 and still have just as much context as you need to watch the whole thing and enjoy it, and then go back and binge the rest, as much as someone who has been watching from episode 1 and maybe picked on some subtle inside jokes that only they would know. And so, like, I think, again, that works in scripted, and Sex and the City is a great example of that. Like, you can tune in on season 4, episode 7, and really enjoy the show. You might not really understand who Mr. Big is, but, like, you're still going to enjoy the show because the characters are amazing and every episode has its own story arc. So I'd love to tap more into scripted. The only problem with scripted is it just costs more money, and so it takes a little bit of buy-in from the brands. And again, I just think the deeper relationship we start having with brands on our unscripted content, I think we'll be able to convince them on the scripted side.
I imagine you being that guy who watches Dune 2 in like 27 different cut downs on TikTok. Like that's energy.
No, unfortunately, the cut downs I watch are of like, this is at 4 a.m. when I am getting to brain rot hours, and it's like some TV movie from the 90s that there's no world in which I need to watch this thing, and I'm looking for part 27 after watching 26.
Adam, this is an intervention, actually. This is not a podcast. Okay, one more thing that I'm really curious about is the TikTok ban. Do you think about her at all? Does she keep you up?
I do out of sadness, just because it is my favorite platform. I still think of Instagram as social media. I don't think of TikTok as social media. I think of it as like a social television. I also think TikTok has parts of old Twitter that I really love, where like someone could write a tweet back in the day and a bunch of people quote tweet it, and it ends up becoming this thing that everyone in the country is talking about. That happens on TikTok. It obviously does not happen on X anymore. And so I'm sad for us to lose that part of it, but I do think India is a great example of looking at what happens post-ban, where it's like, okay, Reels usage shoots up, YouTube Shorts usage shoots up, and then there's a few new platforms that kind of come out of the woodworks.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario is that they sell it and TikTok stays. But I think it kind of reveals a bigger risk, existential risk for you perhaps, which is around this idea of your relationship with your audience being kind of mediated and not tenuous, but there's an intermediary. And we've seen all the writers move to Substacks, and you know, they're owning their relationships directly with their audiences. Like, how do you think about your audiences and this sort of risk around them being platform specific?
It's something that we just think we need to give a little time to get people to become actual true fans of that particular show before we can make the ask to like own that part of a relationship. And so I think in the weeks to come, we'll start testing a little bit out on Boy
weeks. Room. we're in a week time frame, not like
well, this is crazy. I mean, we only released the show, 4 weeks ago. So what's crazy to us is that like already in 4 weeks, Rachel can't go down the street without someone stopping her and asking for a selfie. And we made the Times print. That was crazy. We did not expect that. Every week does feel like it's a year in terms of that show. And I think we have to keep thinking in terms of weeks just because that is sort of the timeline. I will say, though, in the anti-brain rot world, we really do think of our shows in seasons. And we do take breaks after a certain amount of episodes because we want the audience to want it to come back. And we also want to find a way to make it bigger so that Boy Room isn't just in New York. It's like, how do we go do the college tour? How do we go do the West Coast tour? Maybe we go to Europe. There are a lot of boys out there that could use our help. It's good for us to have that break in between so that you're not like, oh my God, this is so overexposed. I've seen Rachel a million times on my feed. Like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on. So fun.
Thank you for having me.
Hear what you're thinking about and talking about. Where can people find you and Boy Room and all the other things you're working on?
So every show we make has its own account. We are at It's Gymnasium on every platform. On TikTok, Boy Room, Instagram, Boy Room. We just launched YouTube Shorts last week for the first time, so apologies if you're a native YouTuber for getting there. And I hope that everyone feels the same way about our next crop of shows as they do about Boy Room.
No pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.